Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Krishna Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jai Radha Madhava, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrata Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Yam Pravrajantamanupeta Kritim Dvaipayano Virahakatara Juhava Putreti Tanmayatayo Taravo Vinedus Tam Sarva Bhuta Hridayam Munimanatosmi Janmadhyasya Yatonvayat Tarataschatyashvabhigyasvarat Teni Brahma Hridaya Dikavaye Muhyanti Yat Suraya Tejo Varimridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargam Risha Dhamnasvena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Satyam Param Dhimahi Satyam Param Dhimahi. So we're reading today a very interesting verse from the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th chapter. Bhagavatam is the answer to questions, text number 8. Yaha Adhyatmikaha Ayam Purushaha Saha Asau Eva Adhidaivikaha Yaha Tatra Ubhaya Vichedaha Purushaha Hi Adhibhautikaha Yodhyatmiko Yam Purushaha Yodhyatmiko Yam Purushaha Sosavevadhidaivikaha Sosavevadhidaivikaha Yastatro Bhayavichedaha Yastatro Daya Vichedaha Purusho Hyadhibhautikaha Purusho Hyabhibhautikaha Yodhyatmiko Yam Purushaha Sosafevadhidaivikaha Yastatro Bhaya Vicheda Purusho Hyadhibhautikaha. Next, please. Yatmiko Yam Purushaha Vikoyam Purusha. Mataji? Yadhyatmiko Yam Purusha. Yastatrobhaya Advibhautika Yaha, one who, Adhyatmikaha, is possessed of the sense organs. I am this, Purushaha, personality, Saha, he, also that, Eva, also, Adhidayikaha, controlling deity, Yaha, that which, Tatra, there, Ubhaya, of both, Vichedaha, separation, Purushaha, person, he, four, Abhibhautikaha, the visible body or the embodied living entity. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the Adhyatmic person. And the individual controlling deity of the senses is called Adhidaivik. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the adhibautic person. I think everything is very clear. So Srila Prabhupada explains the meaning. The Supreme Controlling Summum Bonum is the personality of Godhead in his plenary portion of Paramatma, or the Super Soul manifestation. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said, Adhava bahunaitena kim gyatena tavarjuna vishtabhyaham idam kritsnam ekamshena stito jagat. All the controlling deities like Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva are different manifestations of the Paramatma feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who exhibits himself in such manners by entering into each and every universe generated from him. But still, apparently, there are divisions of the controller and controlled. For example, in the food controlling department, the controller of food is a person made of the same ingredients as the person who is controlled. Similarly, each and every individual in the material world is controlled by the higher demigods. For example, we have our senses, but the senses are controlled by superior controlling deities. We cannot see without light, and the supreme controller of light is the sun. The sun god is in the sun planet, and we, the individual living beings, or any other being on the earth, are controlled by the sun god as far as our eyes are concerned. Similarly, all the senses we have are controlled by superior demigods, who are also as much living entities as we are, but one is empowered while the other is controlled. The controlled living entity is called the Adhyatmic person, and the controller is called Adhidaivik person. All these positions in the material world are due to different fruitive activities. Any individual living being can become sun god or even Brahma, or called the Adibhautic Purusha. The body is sometimes called the Adibhautic Purusha. The body is sometimes called Purusha, as confirmed in the Vedas, in the following hymn: Sava Esha Purusho Anna Rasamayaha. This body is called Anna Rasa embodiment. The body depends on food. The living entity which is embodied does not eat anything. However, the owner is spirit in essence. The material body requires replacement of matter for the wearing and tearing of the mechanical body. Therefore, the distinction between the individual living entity and the controlling planetary deities is in the Anna Rasamaya body. The sun may have gigantic body, and the man may have a smaller body, but all these visible bodies are made of matter. Nonetheless, the sun god and the individual person, who are related as the controller and the controlled, are the same spiritual parts and parcels of the Supreme Being, and it is the Supreme Being who places different parts and parcels in different positions, and thus the conclusion is that the Supreme Person is the shelter of all. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namashristam Manumapi Sachiputra Matra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Urupurim Madhurim Goshtavatim Radha Kunda Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Prathita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Yantah Pravishya Mama Vachimamam Prasuptam Sanjivayata Kila Shakti Darak Svadham Nanyam Schahasta Charana Shravana Tvagadim Pranannamo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam. Hare Krishna. So again, it's a very interesting verse, and I will try to explain the different aspects of its meaning. Literally, from the grammatical point of view, it's very simple. Literally, it is said, Yaha adhyatmikaha ayam purushaha. This purusha, the person, has the nature of adhyatma. His atma, meaning that his consciousness, he's conscious, he can perceive. Saha aso eva adhidaivikaha. But he is indeed, the same Purusha is indeed adhidaivika. So the first line of this verse literally states that there is no difference between Adhyatmika Purusha and Adhidaivika Purusha. And the second line of the verse, again, literally says, Yaha, he who, tatra, there, ubhaya vichedaha, where the differentiation takes place, the differentiation takes place in the Purusha who is Adhibhautika. So, very clear concept. So, literally again, it is said that there is no difference between Adhyatmika and Adhidaivika, but the difference takes place when the Adhibhautika Purusha manifests. So let's try to understand what Srila Shukadev Goswami wants to say. It's actually very rewarding if we understand this. And there could be, of course, different interpretations of this verse. Srila Prabhupada gives one very unique and beautiful interpretation, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives completely different interpretation. So to understand the meaning of this verse, we have to go to context. We cannot understand the meaning of verse without knowing very clearly what is the context of this verse. So the chapter which we are reading from is the 10th chapter, the last chapter of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the whole meaning of this second chapter is to teach us the process of hearing. The first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam was mostly describing the qualification of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam to make this process successful. What are different grades of qualification you have to have to be successful in the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. Being successful meaning completely relinquishing this body, distancing from this body, and obtaining the spiritual identity. And the second canto, again, very logically, is explaining when you're qualified, what should take place when you hear Srimad Bhagavatam. How the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam should happen. Because oftentimes we mix or we substitute hearing and listening. There is a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing means comprehending. Hearing, I hear and I comprehend. And therefore, the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is explaining this process of comprehending the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. Whereas listening means I'm just sitting there and listening. I'm listening to music. It just goes into one ear, comes out from another ear, fine, no problem. I listen. So oftentimes we're sitting in the lecture of Srimad Bhagavatam and we're just listening the lecture of Srimad Bhagavatam. Something is like the leaves in the tree under the wind. What do you call this? Anyway, there is some sound is going on. And sometimes it's very nice, soothing sound, and we just fall asleep. It's so nice, you know. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. But the second canto is important because it explains to us what should take place, you know. First, it is explained that first you should meditate on what you hear, and meditation is supposed to create an upsurge of enthusiasm in you. That's the next very important stage of hearing. If hearing does not produce enthusiasm, then the hearing didn't take place. There was no hearing. Hearing should strengthen the faith, and after this enthusiasm serves as a digestive enzyme which helps us to understand deeper the meaning of what has been said. So then the process of deliberation of what we have heard is described in the second canto. So second canto has these three important parts. First is meditation on the subject matter, which we heard. Then enthusiasm created by this meditation, and then the deliberation on the subject matter. So this last section of the second canto is about this, is about deliberation on the subject matter. And therefore, in the very last chapter of the second canto, the whole context, the whole structure, the whole idea, the whole message of Srimad Bhagavatam is very clearly and beautifully explained. It is explained in this 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is called, which Srila Prabhupada again very aptly entitled Bhagavan is the answer, Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. It is explained the design of Srimad Bhagavatam, the structural design of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam wants to give us the understanding of the nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth. That's the idea of Srimad Bhagavatam. And if we understand the Supreme Absolute Truth in true sense, then everything is done. The job is done. We know the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And to know means to love. And to love means to know. So if we know Him, we may not help but love Him. We will definitely, for sure, 100% fall in love with Him. So, but it's very difficult to explain the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because He's adoxogen. He's not visible by the senses. He's not perceivable by the senses. He's hiding behind this, this beautiful material nature, which is dazzling, which is bewildering, which is putting us into illusion and invoking in us the spirit of enjoyment. So how do we understand Him? How we can understand Him? And therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam adopts a very rational and very interesting methodology to explain the Supreme Absolute Truth, which is the shelter of everything, by explaining how everything which we see, everything which is visible to us, which is perceivable, and everything which is happening to us, how it is connected and dependent on the Supreme Absolute Truth. And by understanding this connection, and understanding how the nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth is reflected in this world, we will understand the Supreme Absolute Truth and fall in love with Him. So that's the methodology of Srimad Bhagavatam. And basically, first 9 cantos are explaining the visible reality, including the reality of our life, what is happening, why it is happening, the reality of the law of karma, reincarnation, so on and so forth. And then we arrive to the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, fully equipped and ready to accept the revelation of the spiritual nature of the Supreme Shelter, Ashraya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beautiful Krishna Himself, who is beautiful cowherd boy. So that's the general design of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is explained in this, specifically in this 10th chapter of the 2nd canto, which describes the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam and explains very clearly that the 9 first topics are there to give us understanding of the 10th topic and to give us the sense of belonging to this 10th topic. Because love is nothing but this mamata. He's mine. So if we understand the inseparable connection between us, this material world, everything, and all other living entities, then this mamata, I belong to Him, and the first stage of our spiritual development will very clearly manifest within our heart, and it means we love the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the whole design and the whole idea of this 2nd canto, and specifically last section of this last 6 chapters of the 2nd canto, and specifically this 10th chapter of the 2nd canto. So in the beginning of the 10th chapter of the second canto, Srila Shukadev Goswami explained these 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. Atra sarga visarga stanam poshanam utaya manvantare shanukatha niroda muktir ashraya. So he says, this is the 10 topics, and then he explains each topic separately. Sarga, creation, visarga, secondary creation, or the creation of the living entities according to their karma, placing them in a respective position. Atra sarga visargascha stanam, the relative position of different living entities which they are occupying according again to their karma in different planetary systems. So the creation of the whole universe is there, and the different planetary system in the universe is there, and the mentality of people who are there, and Porshanam, how they maintain themselves being placed in different positions. And then what is the Manvantara? Manvantara, how, no, Uti, how the nature of individual living entity is formed by their activities dictated by their impetus to act. That's Uti, and then Manvantara means how they should act in reality. What is the real dharma of living entities? And then Ishanukatha, how Krishna manifests his mercy by coming into this world, and how the devotees of the Lord teach us how to behave in this world. And then Nirodha. Nirodha means the destruction of this world and destruction of individual body, destruction of the universe. And then Mukti, liberation, and then Ashraya. So that's, I mean, I'm sure you know perfectly well by now all these 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. So he finished it in the previous verse, Shukadev Goswami, completely. That's topic is covered. So that's basically that's the first verse which we read today of Srimad Bhagavatam proper. So everything else before this verse was the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam. So he gave us the general context, what Srimad Bhagavatam is all about, how Srimad Bhagavatam is designed, and now he starts with the first topic of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is Sarga, elementary creation. But again, from the very beginning, he wants to say that please don't get bewildered, don't get illusioned by the complexity of this material creation. Because the tendency when we try to analyze, and that's exactly what's happening with material scientists, they also study this material creation. And they also try to analyze the material creation. They cut material creation down into different parts and little particles, and cut it more and more and more and more. And they hope that when they cut it to the last particle, then they will find out what they call God particle. That's official physical name of the supposedly the most elementary particle of creation. Now we found, the origin of everything. This is God. This is the shelter of everything. So, but in the process of trying to analyze this material creation, they get completely bewildered, and it's not surprising, because this creation is very bewildering indeed. You try to study little part of it, and you will find out that it's practically unlimited. It's inexhaustible. It's really inexhaustible. Rajarena gave me a good word in Russian. So you like there was one very famous Russian scientist who his whole life was studying the worms which are living in your intestine. That was very interesting subject matter of his scientific research. And somebody asked him, "Are you not bored, studying this worm? Just worm, your whole life you dedicated to study the worm." And he said, "The worm is so long and life is so short." So, so basically the idea here is that, every little particle of creation is so complex, and you can study this little table for the rest of your life, and you will not be able to say with certainty that you know this table because it's so complex. It may look simple, but in reality, there's so much interesting going on, how you can utilize and do this. And that's exactly what people are doing. They're looking at this creation of God, and they become bewildered more and more. And the more that they study, the more they are bewildered, because there is a very interesting design which Krishna, it's built in. This trick is built in this creation. This creation, when we study it separately, seems to be independent. It seems to be self-sufficient. When we look at this creation, everything seems to going on its own. There is some processes, some laws of nature, and people, by studying this, by being bewildered by this material nature, by this material creation, they come to a completely wrong conclusion. There is no need of God. Everything is just working on its own, automatically. It's just a beautiful machine. We don't know how it appeared, but somehow or other it's there. And our real task is to know exactly how it works and to squeeze out the most out of it. So basically that's the idea, and that's how Maya works. We look at the creation and we think, no, it's just working on its own. So therefore, to save us from this gross mistake, gross mistake and at the same time very common mistake, from the very beginning, Srila Shukadev Goswami starts describing the creation in a completely different way. So that's what we see in this verse and the next verse. That's what we should understand, because this is, in one sense, the key verses. He gives us in the beginning, from the very beginning, he gives us the key by having which we can unlock this whole material creation and understand. And he says from the very beginning that the implication of this verse, this and the second verse, because this and the next verse, the 9th verse of this chapter, they are describing the dependence of everything which we see on God. So the mistake which you can make by looking at this creation, everything is independent. And, if everything is independent, I am also independent. I am free. People in this world, they want freedom, right? Everyone wants freedom. Who wants freedom? Yeah. Okay. Very good. Welcome to the material world. There is no freedom here. There is no freedom. It's a fiction. You know, freedom means you should stop breathing because it's a slavery. You have to breathe, you know, and the air doesn't belong to you. Air belongs to somebody else. You're dependent. You're dependent on water. You're dependent on food. You're dependent on other living entities. You're dependent on sages of the previous ages. You're dependent on so many things. And still, we always declare, I'm free. I'm free. We are born by our parents. You know, the Vedic culture would teach how everyone is completely dependent and how to function being dependent properly by recognizing your dependence. Not falsely declaring, I'm completely free, you know, and I can do whatever I like. So, and here is the most succinct and most interesting description of the dependence of the living entity in these two verses, which we have to understand from the very beginning, which is the foundation from the very beginning. So, Srila Prabhupada gives a very interesting interpretation to this verse. Basically, he gives the conclusion. And the conclusion is absolutely right. He says the conclusion which we should understand from this particular verse, from the very beginning, before we start getting into details. Because if we get into details prematurely, we will be bewildered. So first we have to understand what is the conclusion we have to arrive at. And Srila Prabhupada makes this conclusion in the last sentence of the purport. And thus, the conclusion is that the Supreme Person is the shelter of all. So that's the conclusion which we should arrive. And actually, that's the right answer. It's like, you know, if there is some little puzzle or some task in mathematics, sometimes they give you equation and you have to solve the equation, and sometimes they give you the solution. What is the right solution? To make sure that you do it right. So that's the right solution of the whole puzzle. The conclusion, and that's very, you know, apt and appropriate by Srila Prabhupada to say in this introduction to the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, or at least to this topic of Sarga. And thus the conclusion is that the Supreme Person is the shelter of all. So how Srila Prabhupada arrived to this conclusion? By using this verse. Srila Prabhupada makes a very beautiful thing by giving example of the production line. He says, what we see, he says, what Shukadeva Goswami wants to say to us. Srila Prabhupada explains it like this, that we can see by looking objectively in this world that there are people who are higher and there are people who are lower. There are people who are controlling and there are people who are controlled. There are people who are exploiting and people who are being exploited. And why they're there? And Srila Prabhupada says they're basically the same people. You know, some king or big rich person who is exploiting thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who are working for him, making him richer and richer and richer. He is the same person. He is created from the same elements, you know, and you know there are higher living entities, sun god, other gods. They have the same body. Still, they are placed higher. And some are placed higher and some are placed lower. And oftentimes we ask why? Why this injustice is there? why somebody is higher, why somebody is lower. Srila Prabhupada explains that even though they're equal, and sometimes, you know, the revolution is there, you know, great French Revolution, freedom and fraternity and equality, we're all equal, yeah. You know, how many years passed from French Revolution? Nobody is equal. It's against the law of nature. We are created unequal. And all these modern, fashionable, egalitarian ideas, you know, everyone is equal, you know, women are equal and men are equal, and now, you know, you don't even know whether you're man or woman, you know, because you're equal. Anyway, everything is just big potato mash, where no distinction is there. So this is crazy idea. This is completely against the nature of the things. If we objectively and impartially look at the nature of the things, we see hierarchy. It's natural. To deny the hierarchy is just to deny the reality. So the hierarchy is there, somebody is higher, somebody is lower, somebody who is higher always exploiting somebody who is lower. It's inevitable, you know. Poor vegetables are lower than human beings. Therefore, human beings are eating vegetables. If we are to be consistent to bring this idea of equality, we should sometimes eat vegetables and sometimes allow vegetables to eat us. But it's a crazy idea. It's a crazy idea from the very beginning. So there is a natural hierarchy in this creation, and how this hierarchy is created? This hierarchy is created because of karma. Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport why somebody is higher, why somebody is lower. You know, everyone is equal in the sense that if you have some common sense, you will understand that if you behave better, you will be placed in a better position, more advantageous position. If you follow the laws of nature, if you follow the law of karma, you will be placed higher in this chain which is there in this material world. So they're distinguished, they're the same as it is said in this world, in this verse. The Adhyatmika Purusha, but the bodies are different, and therefore they're placed in a different position. And that's how Srila Prabhupada explains this verse. How did he arrive to the conclusion that Supreme Personality of Godhead is the highest of all, is the shelter of all? Very simple. Who created this system? Who is behind this conclusion? By seeing the inequality, accepting, recognizing this inequality, and living within this system, we have to understand that there is some creator of this system who is beyond this system, who is up there. There is God who created this whole system, and actually when we try to say that everything is equal, it's tantamount of saying that there is no God. That's basically what we want to say by trying to, you know, consistently, that's the gist of modern atheistic culture, to say that there is no God. Everyone is equal, everyone is equal. This motto is there, and it's totally atheistic. This whole democratic idea is an atheistic idea. To deny, to disprove, to basically overthrow the natural hierarchical system. So the much more proper understanding, which will give us actually proper intelligence to act and to live in this world properly, is to recognize this and to understand that somebody has created this system. And we should be serving this system. So now, that's Srila Prabhupada's explanation and the conclusion. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives a completely different explanation, which is extremely beautiful. I don't know if you're still capable of listening and comprehending. Listening you can do, that's not a problem. What about hearing? So if it's still possible, I can plunge into it. Again, the verse is enigmatic. It's not an easy verse. Again, first, it is said here that Adhyatmika and Adhidayvika are the same, but they are distinguished on the level of Adhibhautika. So, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives different interpretations to these terms. Very vague, not vague, but very universal philosophical terms which are used again and again and again in the whole Vedanta philosophy. Adhyatmika Purusha, Adhibhautika Purusha, and Adhidayvika Purusha. So he says Adhyatmika is the subtle sense. And the most obvious example of, we have 5 senses, but the eyes is the most obvious example of the senses, because we use our eyes all the time. So when we study the mechanism of perception through our eyes, if we are intelligent, we will arrive to a conclusion that it's a very complicated mechanism, and there are 3 main elements of this mechanisms are there. One is the gross eye, this, and the scientists who study it, they say, that's it, we know what vision means. You have this, thing, gross stuff, which consists of this retina and this and that, so many different elements, and they study it, but you may have completely perfect thing, take it out from the body, and will it see anything? No, it will not see. And even in the body, sometimes it may be completely perfect, but it doesn't see anything. So they are just studying the mechanical process, which is only part of perception. They are not really understanding the mechanism of perception. The mechanism of perception is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, and it is said there that the gross thing which we see and which we call eye or vision has the subtle element which is called sense. The sense, according to philosophy of Bhagavata, is the subtle thing which is the ability to see through this eye. Like, you may have the car, but the car itself is completely useless. It cannot move itself. Of course, now there is this, Tesla cars. They supposedly can move without any driver, but still, why they can drive without driver? Because there is subtle thing, the subtle program is there. So that's exactly what's going on in our vision. There is gross eye, there is subtle sense, which gives us ability to see. So the gross eye is called Adhibhautika. That's the matter. The subtle sense is called Adhyatmika, which is the ability to see within the eye, which makes eye functional. But even this is not enough. We, with our materialistic training, would say, okay, fine, I accept this, but that's enough. No, Srimad Bhagavatam says, no. You cannot see without the Deva, without the subtle being who controls your eye. The sun god is the controller of your eye, and the amsha of sun god is there facilitating this vision process. So the vision process starts with the gross eye, which is there, and then the light of sun god falls into the gross eye. The subtle sense register the gross. The subtle sense is basically this informational mechanism which more or less gets the information from the gross image which is there in our eye. And then there is a sun god which facilitates this process. So, so the verse literally say, please listen, you probably already bewildered as much as material scientists are, but it's interesting. The conclusion will be very interesting. So the process is like this. There is grossing, the light of the sun, which facilitates our vision, which actually controls our vision. Without sun, we would not be able to see, even though the sense would be there and the eye would be there. Then the grossing is taking the light from the sun, and the subtle sense gets this information, converts it into a vision, and then, but the subtle sense can only convert this into an image, which is there in our brain, you know, in some portion of our brain we have this center of vision within our brain. But then, you know, the sun facilitates this process. Sun gives us this ability ultimately. And these three things, what is written here in this verse. The gross thing, subtle thing, and the controlling deity, they are the same. In a sense, they are interdependent. This whole mechanism will not work if one of this element is missing. So that's what is written here. They are interdependent. You know, the subtle sense and the controlling deity, as it is written here, they are the same in the sense that they have the same nature. Like, how to explain this? You know, if we want to train our vision, then to train our vision, we have to take substances which are similar to, which have strong presence of the sun. Like ghee is very good. The best medicine for the eye is ghee. If you have serious disease, you go to Ayurvedic clinic, and they will put some medicated ghee in your eye, and it's horrible. But then immediately after that, you are capable of, you are able to see much better than before, much more clearly. So the nature of the subtle sense and the gross sense as well, they are of the same nature as sun god. So every substance which has the same nature will facilitate our vision, because this is how sun god facilitates or controls our vision. You know, and also people say that if you want to improve your vision, you have to look at this candle, you know, and you should concentrate candle, this trataka, or you should look at the sun, and when it's still very low in the horizon, and by this you improve your vision. This is how sun god, with the sunlight lights, controls our vision. And literally what is said here is that the nature of the subtle sense and the controlling deity, they have the same nature. Therefore it is said they're the same, but they're being distinguished when it comes to the gross level. When it comes to the level of adibautika, of our gross eyes, then the distinction is there. But the implication here, please listen, The implication here is that, the process of perception through eyes is only possible when all three elements are functioning. If you don't have gross physical eye, you will not be able to see. Even though the subtle sense is there, the sun god is there, there's no eyes. There is no mechanism. If somehow or other the subtle sense is impaired, according to your karma, some people are born with completely okay eyes and still they cannot see because something is wrong with the subtle sense. It's not there. The ability is not there. And of course, if the sun god is not there, if we are not nourished by the sun rays and the light which is coming to our eyes, the vision is not possible. So they're interdependent to facilitate the mechanism of vision. But what is the implication? The implication is that there is somebody else who is using this mechanism. Because they are interdependent, they are sheltered in somebody else. Jiva, soul, the perceiver, the witness, the somebody who is there must be there. Otherwise, this mechanical process of these interdependent entities will not culminate into understanding I see something. I look at somebody, I look at Nam Sankirtan, and I say, I see Nam Sankirtan. Who says this? Does it gross eye says that I see? Gross eye doesn't see. Gross eye cannot see, as much as this, this flesh cannot smell. Can the flesh smell? You cut it off. Will it smell? No, it cannot smell. The eye, if you take it out, cannot see Nam Sankirtan. As beautiful as he is, the eye will not be able to see him. Sun god doesn't see Nam Sankirtan. It's Jiva, the soul, interprets and gets the information through this process. Jiva, the soul, is the beneficiary of this process because it's independent of this process. These three things are dependent on each other, cannot exist without each other, but there should be an independent entity which is using this mechanism to interpret and to behave in a certain way. So it's Jiva, it's me, it's Atma who is seeing, not the subtle sense, not the controlling deity, not the gross element, not the gross manifestation of this, but me who is getting this information within my brain, seeing this, watching it, and deciding what to do next. Whether I want to punch Nam Sankirtan or I want to embrace him, that's the decision of Atma, the soul. So what is being said here? That the whole mechanism of material creation is dependent on the witness of Atma, who is capable of perceiving it because he is independent on this mechanism. The conscious living entity, that's exactly what quantum mechanics says, that the processes which are taking place in this material creation are dependent on the witness. And if the witness is not there, the processes are not really, they may not even take place, or they may be different, the consciousness, which is different element, independent on this system. Basically, that's the idea, that's the main point which Shukadev Goswami is making here. Consciousness is independent on the material mechanism of creation. When we're talking about creation, we have to understand there is a distinct element which is the bearer or carrier of this consciousness, somebody who bears the consciousness, this is Atma, who is witness, who is seeing this beautiful cinema of the material world in the cinema theater of his mind. So that's what it is, but that's not the end. That's the implication of this verse, but then, we can also understand that, in turn, we are completely dependent on God. He is the supreme shelter, and he is not, Paramatma is the shelter, and therefore Prabhupada starts this verse by quoting Bhagavad Gita, saying that Paramatma is present and he is the ultimate facilitator of everything which is going on in this material world. He is pervading everything. He is making sure, or making possible for us to be here, making possible for us to enjoy in this material world, arranging everything and facilitating this process, because this whole thing which we see is I'll come to very important conclusion very soon, but the whole idea here is to explain the line of dependence. Adibhautika, for its functioning, is dependent on Adhyatmika. Adhyatmika, on its function, is dependent on Adidaivika. Adidaivika, on its function, is dependent on Jiva. Jiva, on its function, Jiva, because they're all amshas. Jiva is the amsha. Jiva is higher than this whole mechanism, material mechanism. But Jiva is also amsha. Jiva is amsha of whom? Paramatma. Jiva is amsha of Paramatma, is little part, therefore Jiva is dependent on Paramatma. But Paramatma is amsha of whom? Of Bhagavan, of Krishna. And that's exactly what Krishna says here. Vistabhyaham edam kritsnam ekam shenastito jagat. I am pervading this whole jagat by little amsha of mine. Paramatma is amsha of Bhagavan. Bhagavan is whom? Is Krishna. Krishna is the shelter of everything. So that's the ultimate conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna, who is a little cowherd boy, who is going and, coming to Mother Yashoda and saying, will you give me some food today to eat? This little boy who is begging to the wives of Brahmanas and begging of his girlfriends to give him little love and sometimes bowing down to him. This Krishna is the shelter of everything. Everything is amsha of amsha of amsha of amsha, everything which we see. And this is the idea, how we should understand. This is the logical proof. We enjoy perceiving this world. We enjoy interacting with this world. We are under this illusion that I can know this world independently. But this whole process is all dependent on Paramatma, and Paramatma is ultimately a tiny little portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Supreme Enjoyer, and who is described in the 10th canto. So this whole understanding of Sarga, mechanism of creation, the thing which is there, which we see, is ultimately there to facilitate our understanding who Krishna is, how great Krishna is. With how great he is by making himself so accessible to us and so lovable. But before we understand and appreciate his loving nature and his beauty and his accessibility, we have to understand his greatness. And to understand his greatness, we have to understand the mechanism of creation, which is not simple, and understand it in a proper way by seeing the hierarchical structure in the creation, seeing what is higher and what is lower. So here is the very beginning, the general blueprint of this hierarchical nature. Adibhautika is the grossest level, Adhyatmika is the next level, Adidaivika is the next level, then Jiva is the fourth level, Paramatma is the fifth level, Bhagavan is the sixth level. So that's the whole design of the creation. And that is what is being described in this verse and in the next verse. How the processes are not complete without the Supreme Controller, and how they will not take place if the Supreme Controller, if we suppose that Supreme Controller is not there, nothing would work. The Supreme Controller, the presence of Supreme Controller should be concluded from seeing what we see. It can only function because the Supreme Controller is there. If we remove him from the picture, even though it looks like he's not there and he's not directly involving, he is involved. He is involved. He is in the heart of everyone. And believe it or not, he's in our heart as well. So that's the conclusion of this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is not easy to understand. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Yes.
Искусственные процессы, искусственное оплодотворение, там, клонирование, как вот понять, где там, есть ли там вообще эти тонкие чувства, они там тот же процесс работает, или это какой-то...
Конечно. Тонкие процессы, это... О, sorry. Artificial dissemination of fertilization. Behind the growth processes, there is always some subtle process, which is basically the exchange of information. Like in computer, we can clearly see it. There is this growth thing which will not work if there is no, more subtle informational process which is taking place. So science is only manipulating the existing mechanisms. Science cannot create anything new. It can only manipulate it, and usually not in a very good way, but it just manipulates the system which is there, which is created by God. Scientists didn't invent anything. They're trying to, and they're good at not imitating, but reproducing the processes which are already taking place in nature. They are studying these processes and then reproducing them in more artificial conditions. Nothing else than this. The mechanism, they're not creating. Even this, computers, what is this? This is just a manifestation of, their understanding of the processes which are taking place in the brain. And what is artificial intelligence? It's nothing but they realized how the mechanism of our brain or our mind is learning things, and therefore this neural networks is being created. They're just reproducing the existing mechanisms. You know, if they would invent themselves, no, they looked what is going on here, and then they reproduce this there. But nothing new, nothing special. You know, it's like this. There was a beautiful example. When the dog is barking, nobody is very much impressed. But when an artist on the stage starts barking exactly like the dog, everyone is so impressed. Oh yeah, oh, he barks so nicely, you know. So the same way, when this thing is taking place naturally, nobody is impressed. But when the scientists start doing this in their lab, they say, oh, such a big achievement. It's just barking of the human being on the stage, you know. Nobody says to the dog, oh, you're barking so nicely. No. So that's what it is, nothing else. Human beings are only as good as they can imitate the nature. They can't really invent anything new. Yes, Lieutenant.
Some could say that actually scientists, by all their detailed studies like that, they're actually uncovering a lot of knowledge that seemingly is not in the Vedic scriptures, like such as, you know, the atomic models, nuclear physics, or knowledge of DNA and biochemistry and so on. What, I mean, so why is that not included in the Vedas?
Because Vedic system of knowledge is completely different. Vedic system of knowledge is giving you the holistic picture of the reality without bewildering you with all these details, because these details is the result of the passionate intelligence. When the intelligence is driven by the mode of passion, then this passionate intelligence will analyze in minute details the reality, and in the process of analyzing the reality in minute details, it will become completely bewildered by all these little details. As they say, they will not see the forest behind the trees. They will see the trees, they will see the things, but they forget about the forest. So the modern science is a creation of Rajagun, of mode of passion. The Vedic science is the creation of Sattvagun. Sattvagun seeks synthesis, not analysis. Sattvagun synthesizes things and gives the complete holistic picture of reality. This holistic picture of reality is has not less predictive power. Actually, the measurement of the good theory in science is its predictive power. If any theory of reality can predict something, then it's a good theory. And how accurately it can predict, and what are the, you know, how far fetched the prediction could be. That's the measurement of the good theory. So Vedic theory, from this point of view, is a perfect theory, because it has so many, it has such a powerful, you know, it's a very powerful instrument. You know, even, but they're not, because it's holistic, they're not really using the mathematics as its instrument. Mathematics is necessary when you try to dissect everything, when you try to cut down everything to pieces, and then, you know, you operate with all these little pieces, and then you try to, again, reproduce how the whole will function, but you will never be able to see the whole, because you already cut the reality into pieces. So the very simple example is Ayurveda. Ayurveda doesn't say anything about DNA. Ayurveda doesn't say anything about all these different toxins, doesn't study the nature of this toxin or that toxin. Ayurveda says ama. Ama means all the toxins, you eat some food, whatever is not digested is ama. Ayurveda doesn't care, what is this polyphenol or, is it fatty nature or is it fatty acid or this and that. Couldn't care less. It knows that there is ama. Ama is the product of indigestion, and this is the product which clogs your shrotriyas. And this is how the disease comes into being. There is ama, and, by knowing this simple process, which doesn't have all these complicated bombastic names, polyphenol, fatty acids, this and that, and God knows. By knowing this simple process, you have the universal tool of how to treat all the diseases. You know how disease originates, how, according to the unique constitution of your shrotriyas, your channels, this ama clogs them, somebody is clogged in arteries, somebody is clogged in anyway, it's still quite complicated, but it gives you picture and gives you a very powerful tool how to treat diseases without being completely bewildered in this process. Because the scientists, they study the same thing, ultimately the same thing, but because there are so many categories and nobody can know everything, so they, ultimately they became the very narrow specialist, and there are specialists, there are so many parts in the ear, before that there was only somebody who is the specialist on the ear and nose. Now it's only the specialist of the ear, but even the specialist of the ear can say to you, because he doesn't know everything about the ear, he knows only something about what is inside the ear, and if your disease is outside, then he cannot say this, and you have to go to another specialist, and then, the left ear is different from right ear. And you have to study it differently, and you have to treat it differently. So this is the absurd of the modern science. By this methodology, the Sattvic science of Vedas try to see the forest, and always keep the forest, the picture of this, and moreover to understand the dependence of everything on God. But it has very powerful tools, not less powerful, much more powerful actually. Unfortunately, it's lost to a greater extent, but as far as the theory is concerned, it's beautiful, and there's, yeah. It doesn't work because the herbs are not powerful, because the processes, because it's subtle. The subtle things don't work in this gross age of Kali Yuga because it's just too subtle and everything is gross. Our diseases are very gross. And, to prepare the proper medicine, you have to, in Ayurveda, you have to harvest the herb in the proper season, you have to do it with certain consciousness, and so many subtleties are there, like I was in Ayurvedic clinic, and they produce one medicine, it takes them, and that's not the longest one, 47 days to produce the medicine. Just, 47 days is just to mix. And there's one lady sitting there, and the doctor said, when you do this procedure according to the scriptures, you have to do it again and again and again. Then at one level, the whole structure becomes so subtle, then the consciousness of somebody who is doing this goes into it. And they said that the most difficult part of our producing this medicine is to find people who will be for 48 days mixing this and at the same time having good consciousness, so that not Rajasic or Tamasic consciousness would enter this medicine. So they say this is the most difficult part. We really first take a person and we observe him, giving him some or her some simple procedures, and then we see how sattvic he is, how peaceful he is, and then only, you know, very selected people, they are able to do this. So who will do this? You know, there are few people who are still doing this, but you know, if you need to compete, you have to produce, you know, Dabur Chyavanprash, and put it with, you know, 200 rupees per bottle, you know. It's just, it's a joke. You know, it will become very expensive because, you know, for one little medicine you have to do so much labor. I was in another clinic, the doctor there says that easily to produce one medicine may take 1 year from the beginning to end, sometimes 3 years. He is producing medicines on the basis of mercury. And mercury is a very powerful thing, but it's a very complicated thing because you have to, you know, through different procedures, you have to remove the poisonous element from mercury. So, and they're working there, and I saw these ladies who are, you know, mixing this mercury with herbs, and you know, it's many rounds of it. So who will do it? Where you find, especially if you take this Dabur medicine, okay, you know. Maybe some of them work just as an exception, because again, you know, there is a simple theory, but we have to respect the complexity of reality too. And the complexity of reality is being respected by this complexity of the, or subtlety of the procedures which are involved. But we can appreciate the beauty of the whole theory, like, you know, simple theory of 3 modes of material nature, how powerful it is. You know, you can immediately, you know, somebody who knows nothing can read about this and understand, yeah, that's fine, yeah, that's not, now I can understand what I should eat, what I should not eat, and you know, how I should behave myself. It's such a simple thing, you know, but at the same time it's so deep and so subtle, you know. So that's the problem with Vedic science. Yeah, it doesn't work. Or, you know, astrology, it doesn't really work in reality. Why? Because it's too subtle. You know, something is much grosser is necessary. You know, when there is no subtle mechanism, then the only mechanism which works is a hammer. That works, you know. You take the hammer of allopathic medicine, it's oh, very good.